Deathworlders to the Extreme by Aquastar Shark. Chapter 5 Unexpected. Bad things happen to Aizawa and stuff happens with Shinto. They expected hundreds of potential outcomes, discovering the entire ship to be dead, the exception or not, being a feral, bloodthirsty deathworlder. Finding nothing but the shattered remains of a ship forced itself to deconstruct the floating corpses surrounding with the metallic carnage, evacuated crew and criminals in drifting escape pods, as the deathworlder wreaked havoc within the ship. They expected to dock the ship and search for, or even immediately encounter, the deathworlder and to retrieve it, peacefully or successfully or not. They expected so many things and so many scenarios during the meeting, but the one they did not expect was the first shot. All was silent shock when the first blue strike of blaster fire collided with Rocklock's cruiser, sending it careening for a full 10 clicks before its backup thrusters kicked in and kept it from drifting into deep space. Nobody was sure what had happened. Shota certainly didn't, as possible scenarios ran rampant through his mind. Mistaken identity, a trigger-happy guard, even a deathworlder with more intelligence than expected were possible reasons for the shot that came to mind. It was the shifting turrets that revealed the more sinister reality and sent the battle-hardened pros into action as the full firepower of the ship was set upon the scattered and weaving heroes. The area was so full of shots that even Shota, a hero with over a decade of piloting experience, could only narrowly avoid the scattered blast fire. His radio crackled with the many disoriented and struggling heroes, and among the voices, Shota heard Sir Nida's sharp call. "All heroes, retreat! We cannot return fire with the risk of a dead or worse loose deathworlder in space." Crack. Shota cursed as a straight blast crashed into his ship during his moment of distraction, shutting off his monitor and presumably all systems but vital. The world outside his ship spun with blaster fire as the faint beats echoed within. "I have to get systems online, preferably communications. At this rate, I'd be easily lost in the chaos if not Shota thought. Shoving down the faint panic and terror that pricked at his consciousness at the possibility. Dying in space would not be ideal. Shota unbuckled from his seat and flung his floating form towards the area of his ship's primary system, but not quick enough. Boom! The force of the second shot threw Shota against a wall as it reverberated through the ship. Likely a force bomb, and Shota bit back a cry as he felt his arm crack against the metal, sending hot rivets of pain throughout the limb and the rest of his body. Shota blinked against the black spots, and in the corner of his vision, he spotted the view outside the spin faster and faster. Huh, is the ship getting smaller? Shota thought absently. He gazed up at the view outside. Wait, no. I'm drifting away. The shock of the realization was enough to bite through the pain and sent Shota into agonized action as he unclipped the entry point of the systems. Fried. The choking horror that filled Shota was a rival to the pain of his arm, as he stared at the blackened wire and controls. Frag! I need a new solution. Shota flung the gun and backup darts from his person to add mobility as he swung himself through the ship, broken arm trailing uselessly behind him as he searched for another way to get systems online to no avail. He checked and checked, even going as far as to search for the manual to his ship that he'd already read dozens of times before. He knew that a missing hero would not be high priority in the light of the attack, and he refused to hold hope for any rescue unless he get these slag systems online. Yet no matter his efforts, he couldn't find anything. Shota didn't hold back his whimpers as the pain resistance hardened by adrenaline began to wear off. Allowing the agony of his broken limb to flood his mind, he curled around it as he drifted. By that point, at least half a war must have passed, and he searched through any potential solutions, including his comlink, which he already knew wouldn't work in space. And so he always returned to his chair. So he slowly returned to his chair and strapped in, and he blinked against the pain. The waves of agony coursed through his veins like magma, and as black spots in his vision began to sprinkle in intensity. Buckling with one paw was a difficulty made worse by the pain lashing at his senses. This situation wasn't to join he This wasn't a situation he'd expected when they set off. It was only one they would It wasn't one they could logically predict. Yet it happened, and as Shota gazed out the window with the realization that he could no longer see the ship, he knew he found himself in a terrible, precau- precocious situation, in pain, alone, and afraid. Bile stained the red soil. Bile stained the red soil as Hitoshi leaned against a tree puking the fingerful of nut mush and half the stomach acid he had. His head spinning, and he could feel the sharp edges of the bark pinch at his hands, but he couldn't spare a thought as he gasped for breath between gags and pains of nausea. The second wave of nausea produced nothing but stomach acid that stung his throat and left him once more gagging for breath. Okay, at the very least, I know I shouldn't eat the inside of those nuts. Unprepared. Noted. Itoshi greedily filled his lungs with the alien planet's cold night air and wiped his mouth with the torn corner of one of his leaf blankets. He felt gross and tired, and he wanted nothing more but to go home to his admittedly still pretty terrible foster parents. But instead he only stumbled back into the pod and collapsed into his bed with an exhausted groan. He was glad to prop his foot into the crate. Doing so had definitely helped ease the pain over the course of however long he slept, and he tried to relax as much as possible so that he might get some more sleep. He failed. The next morning, Hitoshi set off in the direction of the mountains in search of a water source. With two new creations he created in his insomniac field days, a staff and a backpack. The staff he'd carved from a branch outside the pod using the sharp stone and was designed to work as both a cane and a spear when necessary. With a sharpened he'd spent so far too long trying to make symmetrical. The backpack, on the other hand, was something made from the outer shell of the nut, and threaded with multiple wood strings that he carved the holes for using the sharp-edged rock. The mush he dumped into some leaves and wrapped up trying to make it edible later. The idea to find a water source had come to mind while he carved in a nutshell, which took so long to do. As with some nuts on Earth, you could soak and boil nuts to make them edible. However, he didn't want to waste his actually clean and sterilized water on a cooking experience, since he needed to try and find a permanent water source anyway on the planet. It wasn't that depressing. He might as well do it ASAP, honestly. He didn't need to try and make the nut edible, but since he was on an alien world, it would be best to know what was edible and what could be used as a resource. He was curious and wanted to do some exploring. Sue him! Actually, no, don't do that. He didn't have any money, so he could probably would probably lose, considering that everyone's view on him was influenced by his parentage. Fortunately, keeping his ankle braced for the night helped quell the pain, and it hurt far less as he trekked through the woods with the cane holding some of the weight for his foot. It was still tender, of course, and sent pain up and down his leg when he walked on it, but it did feel better and was even less swelled so that it was nice and likely would be enough for his little quest. He should probably take a few days off survival soon just to relax and rest his ankle. Though, only if he gets to sleep. It only took a few minutes of trekking, not including the occasional 30-second pause Toshi took for his ankle. For the pod to leave his view, and Toshi made sure that every step onwards marked with scratches on the ground carved with his staff that were clearly visible on the forest floor. By then, the sun had already begun to rise, and right after what felt like an hour of walking was already blazing in the sun, and was already blazing in the sky and making the back of Toshi's neck sting with its warmth. He stuffed away his jacket by then, but he was already so sweaty that the scent would probably cling to his clothing even after a wash. Even shade didn't help much with the heat, though. Hitoshi made sure to stick to the darker areas just for the sake of avoiding a sunburn, though he was sure he had already gotten one. The steady uphill climb didn't help much either. His muscles ached even with only a small incline, and his feet felt like he stuck them into acid. Needless to say, he was tempted to quit the journey and simply head back to the pot for a nap, but he persisted. After a while more, it was just as Hitoshi's white-knuckled hand began to ache that he had heard the telltale sound of water. At first, he wasn't quite able to comprehend what it was. The sound so faint it was rushed over his ear with the sounds of the forest. A faint hum. As he stumbled along, however, his leg suddenly hit a small pebble that he crashed against a rock, sending an echo that silenced all the forest life for a moment in which the sound of water was noticed. He followed the sound with reverence. It was the first possible sign in his quest, after all, and eventually, after an adventure that lasted for the sun traveling a third way across the sky, and a snack break that was initiated, initiated, ini- that's not spelled right, initiated when Hitoshi encountered a fruit-laden pineapple lemon plant on his journey. By that point, the sun was high enough that the intensity of the sunlight made even the sweat on his neck sting. So when he came across a small lake where the stream ran into, he didn't hesitate to plug his head into the depth. Hitoshi shrieked and looked back as a large and slimy something brushed through his hair. The soft-looking fish creature shot off, its tail fins leaving a pair of ripples hovering on the surface of the water. Hitoshi blinked once, twice, and then a toothy grin spread across his face. Protein, he thought, delighted at the prospect of including fish into his diet once again. The fish started to slow, calming down after its initial fright so Hitoshi could silently creep forward. Spear ready to strike, the fish continued its journey through the lake, and Hitoshi watched from his perch. Remarkably patient for somebody awaiting meat for his first meal. Its fins flicked the surface, a mere 2 feet from Hitoshi's rock, then drew closer and closer, and splash! The spear cut through the water, embedded itself in the fish's struggling body, and glittered in the air as Hitoshi flung his prize out of the water. The fish flopped for a few seconds, despite the large hole in its body, but it soon stilled, and Hitoshi cheered as he limped to it with glittering eyes. Red pooled under the fish, its staring eyes already glazing over, and Hitoshi placed it on top of one of the many large rocks around the pond to allow it to drain. Hitoshi eyed the lake. He hadn't showered in so long that the idea of a bath sounded heavenly, especially considering the heat and sweat staining his clothes. It wouldn't hurt to take a few minutes for a bath, right? Mind made up, Hitoshi quickly undressed and sat into the pond with a shuddering breath. It was cold, but he had worse. Skin crawling, Hitoshi dunked his head below the surface and pushed off the edge before swimming slowly. Slow, delicate circles in the corner of the lake. It was deeper than he thought it would be, and the light fins brushing past his body made him grin at the prospect of future fishing meals to be had. The cool water soothed his twinging ankle, and when Hitoshi looped back to find his clothes to wash them too, he made sure to keep his ankle and brace and all steady in the water. Hitoshi dunked and gently scrubbed at his clothes with a rock to better clean them, and carefully laid them across the rock once done in full warm sun before returning to his bath to relax. The water felt so nice on his skin, flowing over his skin or relieving his body of the pain and heat he'd hiked through for hours, and soon the cool water felt comfortable. So comfortable that Hitoshi propped himself against the rocky ledge of the lake and let his muscles relax. His muscles relax. His tired muscles relax. Let's repeat it twice. He felt good, great even, as the sun shone down overhead. His exhaustion caught up and his eyes gently closed.